Hi everyone! So today we're going to make this Missing You card using the Polar Bear Pal stamp set by MFT stamps and some Copic markers. And to start, we're just going to stamp our images onto the page using a Copic friendly black ink. Here I'm using Memento black ink and the cardstock is Nina cardstock 110 pound weight. And then the little heart stamps comes from the Cute Chemist stamp set by MFT Stamps that was just released as part of their January 2019 release. And we're going to sketch in some lines just to help us with our background. Here I'm just sketching in the lines to show where the little ice shelf is that our little polar bear in the far distance is standing on. And then I'm just going to sketch in the landscape around our larger polar bear who's closer to us at the bottom of the scene. Next we're going to start filling in the sky, and we're going to use B91, and we're going to flick upwards from the base of the skyline to about maybe a third of the way to the edges of the page. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to add in some lighter blue shades as well, just to give the sky kind of like a variated and interesting look. And also this darker blue at the bottom of the sky is going to help to give the effect that there are some trees in the background behind the smaller polar bear. So now I'm taking my B0000 and I was just flicking from the top of the page downwards just to leave a really, really light wash of very light blue ink on the page. And then we're going to flick upwards with our B000. So we're going to flick from the ends of the B91 strokes up towards the top, but maybe not all the way to the top. And I'm just being careful not to leave a lot of color into my hearts. Although we're going to color them in red, so we probably, even if we did completely color over them, it might not change the color so much. So for our little polar bear on the bottom, he's going to be standing on an icy lake. So I'm using my same B91 marker here, and then I'm going to fill it in with some B000. And I did this just so that the top of the scene kind of matches the bottom so that there's a little bit of balance to the scene. And I did put stamping paper over my larger polar bear just because I knew I was going to be sloppy coloring on the bottom of the page. Okay, now this is the fun part. So this is something I haven't done before. So I wanted to make it look like the little polar bear in the back is standing kind of on an ice shelf and that he's separated from the polar bear in the front. And to do that, I just drew kind of like a crooked, craggly line, and then I'm just flicking downwards with a C3 Copic marker and then blending it out with a C1. And that's really it. That's all you need to do to make a little ice shelf like this. So the surface of the ice shelf is just going to be plain white, and then the little edges where it's sort of starting, I guess, to look like it's in 3D, that's going to be the part that is going to have our darkest marker, and then we're going to just blend it all together with a C1. And I even put one stripe of a dark gray down the center of the ice shelf just to kind of make it look like it had corners as well. So it's not just jutting out, but it's also like jutting to the sides as well. And then for the top of the snow, at the top of that ice shelf, I thought that it needed a little bit of color. So I'm just using my B60 marker there. It's a really, really light purple shade. And then we're gonna further enhance the effect that there are some trees behind our little bear with a C1. And I'm just drawing straight lines. And then here and there, I may make my line look like a little bit of a triangle. So there's barely the shape of a tree back there. I just want it to look like all misty and that all these trees are really far in the distance that you can barely tell what's going on. But it still makes it look like there are some trees behind him and adds some depth to the scene, and also helps it to look like that little polar bear in the back is really, really far away from the little polar bear or the big polar bear in the front. So now we're going to start working on the bottom of our scene, and this is the part of the scene that's closest to us. So our images are going to be larger and they're going to be darker colored because that's going to help draw the images closer to the forefront of the scene and make them look like they're closer to us. So I'm just going to do trees the same way you've seen me do lots of times on this channel. I just draw a little straight line from the base of the tree to where I want the tree to end, I guess the tip of the tree, and then I just put a whole bunch of little scribbles back and forth to make the body of the tree. And I'm using my C1, my C3 Copic markers, and then to add some detail to the trees that I want to appear closer, I'm going to go over those with a C5 and then even a C7. So this way we'll have some trees that are in the distance that are colored in very, very lightly with very little detail. And then maybe the 2 or 3 trees that are closest to us and closest to our big polar bear on the bottom, they're going to have our darker gray shades, and that's going to help to pull them to the front of the scene. So here I'm adding my darker shades now to pull those 2 or 3 trees closer to us. So I'm just going over the tree with a C5, and then I'm also going to do that to some of the trees behind the little polar bear. And then also to his side, I just thought it would be nice if he was framed by several of the trees. And I'm just, again, like adding scribbles really is all that it is. I'm sorry, my hand is blocking the view, but I guess that's what you get when you're left-handed. Now we're going to add in the darkest shading on the trees, and you just want to be careful with this one. The C7 is really going to bring the trees close to the forefront of the scene, but you don't want to add too much. You just want to maybe have it on about a quarter of the tree. If you're thinking in terms of how much of the tree is covered, maybe about a quarter of the outline of the tree is going to have that really, really dark marker on it. Okay, so here I pulled off the masking tape, and now we can start coloring in our little bear on the bottom. And for both of the bears, we're going to do the same exact shading. And I'm just going to focus the shading on the outsides of the bear's body, and then on the left side of the bear's face, or I guess it's the right side of the bear's face, but it's the left side that we're to us because we're looking at him head on. And I'm just going to blend out that shading with a C1, and then even more so with a C00. These are really good images to practice your shading because there are a lot of natural areas where the shading would go. So for example, underneath the scarf, that's a good spot for the shading. There would be a little bit of a shadow because his scarf would be kind of jutting out from his body. And then also the sides of the body. It's also a good opportunity to shade that. His body is kind of roundish kind of, and round objects I find are easier to shade when you're first starting out. Also around the head, that's another obvious area that you could add some shadings to. And here I think you can start even experimenting a little and try shading. Maybe you just want to shade half of the face to make it appear as though the light source is coming from the other side instead of just shading the total outer edges of the face. You could start doing that. This would be a good image to kind of practice on that, to do shading when there's a light source coming maybe from the upper right hand or the upper left hand corner of the scene. So I'm just going to finish my shading here. And I had thought about maybe shading in the polar bears with a W marker with the warm gray markers. And in the first version of this painting, I had done that. And that version is on Instagram if you want to take a look. And I decided that because we use so much cool gray on the rest of the scene, that it would just be more cohesive to keep the little polar bears in cool gray. Although I do love how they look in warm gray. But I guess I'll have to make another card to play around with that color scheme. All right, so for the scarf, I'm making it striped, so we have V01 and V05 for the lighter purple parts of the scarf, and then BV04, and I think that was BV08 on the darker shades. And then for the little boy bear, polar bear all the way in the back, we're going to give him a green striped scarf. So we're going to use G24 and G28. And then for the lighter parts of the scarf, we're going to use G43 and then G46. And then once we finish up the scarves, then it's time to shade in all of the hearts that are kind of emanating or exploding from the two little polar bears who miss each other so much and wish they could be together, but there's this big, I guess, shelf of ice separating them. So we're going to start our hearts in pretty dark reds towards the bottom, and then as we get up towards the top of the scene, we're going to lighten up the heart. So every 4 or 5 hearts, I will start lightening up the shades. So we started with, I think that was R39 and R89. And then for our next layer of hearts, we're going to use R46 as the base and then shade it with R56. And then as we move upwards, we're going to move to R24 as our base shade for the next 5 or 6 hearts. And then we're going to shade in those hearts with an R29. And I'm focusing my shading on the bottom portions of the heart. So what I wanted this to look like is that, you know, when the hearts kind of come out from the polar bear to start, they're a really deep dark red, and then they kind of dissipate and get lighter and fade off as they kind of bubble up towards the sky. And for our little polar bear in the back, we're going to give him really, really light reds because he's far away. So naturally, any hearts coming from him are going to look lighter than those that are closest to us. And for the light hearts, I used R14, R17, and then YR12 as well. And I just like that little ombre effect that you get with the hearts. I just think it gives the scene a little extra something and helps to reinforce that there is a lot of distance and depth to the scene. Now we're going to add some snow to our trees, and we're not going to put the snow on all the trees, but we're going to focus our snow on the trees that are closest to us, which are the trees that are the largest and the darkest. And the fact that they have a lot of detail on them is going to help reinforce that they are close to us. And also the snow is going to show up the best on the darker trees because the white will show up much better on the darker background than it would if you were to put snow on one of the really, really light gray trees. And then we're going to add some highlights to our little hearts, and I'm just putting little dashes on the corner of the hearts, and for the really tiny hearts, we'll just put a little dot in the center or towards the bottom of those. And then I also put a few little polka dots on the scarves, and then some black glaze pen on the nose and on the eyes for the polar bears. Now it's time to remove the painter's tape, which leaves this nice 1/8 of an inch border around the scene, which I really love. And I also use the tape just because it helps me to hold the card panel steady when I'm recording for all of you so that the paper's not moving around, it's just in one stationary place. But I also do like the look that the border gives. I had forgotten to put a shadow underneath the polar bear, so I'm just doing that now. I'm just using my C1 and I think a little bit of a C3 marker. And I'm just putting that underneath their feet. And I stamped the sentiment off screen using some black licorice cardstock by Lawn Fawn and some white embossing powder. And I just love the sentiment. It says, "Waving high, wishing you were here." And I just love this little scene of the two little polar bears that are kind of waving to each other. And they're just so far apart. All right, see you again soon, everyone.